Welcome everybody to the Finance and Investment Committee of Vallecitos Water District on Monday, March 22nd, 2021 at 2 p.m. via teleconference. I'm going to read a quick little note to the notice to the public. Due to the evolving situation with the COVID-19 novel coronavirus and Executive Order N-35-20, so long as state or local public officials have imposed or recommended social distancing measures, Vallecitos Water District will hold future meetings via telephonic or future meetings telephonically or otherwise electronically. During this period of time, Vallecitos Water District will not be making any physical location available for members of the public to observe the meeting and offer public comment. The public is encouraged to watch and participate in the meeting from the safety of their homes. The meeting can be viewed on the agenda page located on the main page of the district's website. Public comments or questions can be submitted to the following email address, publiccomment@vwd.org. All written comments that are received 90 minutes before the meeting will be provided to the board, and a record of the receipt of comment will be noted during the meeting. And I'll go ahead and call us to order. Glenn, I don't think we need a roll call, do we?
I don't believe so, no.
Okay, so let's go ahead and jump right into items for discussion, unless there's public comment outside of something that's not going to be talked about later on during the agenda.
Yes,
do you have any hands raised?
I did. Carol G had her hand raised and it has since been withdrawn. I did receive, or the board did receive 2 emails, but both items are related to item number 3 on the agenda. Nothing specific public comment.
Okay.
Carol G's hand went back up. It may be a good time to allow her to talk.
Yep. So if persons wishing to address a matter that's not on the agenda may be heard at this time. However, no action will be taken until the matter is placed on a future agenda in accordance with board policy. Public comments are limited to 3 minutes. A request to speak form is required to be submitted to the executive secretary prior to the start of the meeting, if possible. Public comments should start by stating your name, address, and topic. The board is not permitted during this time to enter into a dialogue with the speaker. And of course, we're not doing the speaker slips. So the raised hand counts as the speaker slip. So go ahead and let any speakers in at this time, Glenn.
Okay, I'll let Carol G. Go ahead, Carol. Is this related to an item on the agenda, or is this unrelated?
I believe it is related to an item on the agenda. I didn't realize that was that was the format. So I am willing to send an email and have that recorded for the public record, if that's what needs to be done.
That could be done, Carol, and you also are more than welcome to when we get to the item that you want to speak about, we'll reopen it to the public as well. So if you want to wait, you're certainly welcome to.
That's fine. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I'll lower my hand.
Okay. Thank you for joining us. Okay, Glenn, let's go ahead and kick off item number 1, operating budget request.
Okay, I know we've got a busy agenda and we have 3 items on there, and I think we only have 2 hours, so we'll jump right into it. I'm going to turn it over to Wes, and he's going to walk you through the preliminary operating budget requests, and Wes will explain how preliminary it really is and what that means as we move forward. So Wes, take it away.
You're on mute, Wes.
Are you muted? Yeah.
Am I off now?
We can hear you now.
Awesome. So that was a great introduction. I don't know if I can do that again. Let me try. Good afternoon, President Snella, Director Boyd Hodgson. Welcome to the second Finance Committee meeting of budget year 2022. Budget party page always gets us in a good mood to get going. So this is actually where we get to start having some fun in the budget process. I mean, if you weren't already having fun, we get to start now. This is the sausage making, really. It's we're going through the whole process, collecting the details. It is really preliminary. These are draft numbers. It's all subject to change, but we like to keep the Finance Committee involved in every step of the process. So you're going to get to see how the process goes tonight. And I'll be saying that we're going to be making changes or fixing things a lot along the way, and I apologize in advance for that. But again, it is the preliminary stages of the budget process. So That being said, let's take a look at the agenda. So first we'll go over the budget background and give you a progress update on how we're doing as far as the budget process so far. And then we'll talk about the operating budget requests. At this point, we've gotten the request from supervisors to managers. Managers have done a first review of it. We do need to do more revising and refining. However, it's been collected and entered into the budget, so we get to see sort of the preliminary overview of the requests. Then we'll talk about the next steps in the budget process. And then after that, the next item on the agenda is the auditor agreement. And finally, we'll talk about the CWA MWD lawsuit refund. So getting into the budget calendar, we've gone through this again, so I'll just give you a quick update on what happened in February. We updated the budget with the audited 2020 numbers. We completed the 2021 projections, and then individual departments have prepared their budget requests for operations, submitted them to their managers, and those have now come to the finance department to be entered into the budget. Then on February 22nd, we had our first finance committee meeting. And in that meeting, we went over the budget calendar and we talked about the budget versus actual for the last 5 years. So now we're in March and we've compiled those requests, the department requests, into the operating budget. And we finished off the fiscal year projections for 2021. We are working on the personnel and payroll estimates. Those should be complete by the end of the month. Currently, they're actually in the numbers you're going to see today, but they're rough and they're going to change. And I'm probably going to say that 6 times during this presentation. The debt service forecast will be complete by the end of the month. And then March 22nd today, we are reviewing the operating budget requests, and we have several special guests at the meeting. Today we have our O&M manager, Ed Pedrazzi, with us. We have our engineering manager, James Gumpel. And we have a couple supervisors here with us today. We have our new meter services supervisor, Chris Tapia. He'll be talking about some meters, hopefully meter changes. And we have Michael Rassam. And we have another special guest, Mike Arthur, but he's at every meeting. So he's still a special guest, but he really needs no introduction, I guess. So then moving on to start the process, I want to give sort of an overview. I know that we have Director Boyd Hodgson here and that she's new to the process, so hopefully we can kind of go through how the details flow into the summary so that we're all on the same page and we can see how it works. I don't want to just start talking about stuff and lose people. I tend to refer to documents back and forth, and I just want to make sure that I'm not doing that too quickly and that everybody can follow along. I did send out 4 documents.
Point of information, please.
Hey, Wes, we have a question.
Sure.
Thank you. Is it possible going forward, if you're going to show something like this on the screen, to make it bigger? I'm working on a very small laptop and that's very tiny. So just going forward, could you try to do that, please?
Sure. Yeah, and this one here, this is for more of a flow reference, hopefully. So I'll try to make it bigger in the future, but this is more like arrows. We don't need to pay attention to the numbers just yet. Okay. So this is, I really want to show how the flows. I did send the 4 documents. Hopefully you received them on Friday. There were water and sewer for both the materials and services. So 2 documents, and then the water budget and the sewer budget. So I'll be referring to those and page numbers as we go. This one here is the materials and services budget, just an excerpt from that budget, from that materials and services, the water, and this is the water quality section. But I just want to show how it flows into the budget document and how they relate. So right now we don't really need to look at the numbers so much, but I'll do my best to make them bigger in the future. So starting off with this, we can see that this is the excerpt from the water quality department. And actually I can get you that page number. I think it's on page 2 of the water materials and services, if you'd like to refer to it. So you can see it has the materials and services, and then we have the outside services for the same department. So this is the detail, and this is where the supervisors and managers request their line items. They go up to, maybe even $100 amounts, specific items. So all the detail, you can see it shows who it's requested by. It's the supervisor or the manager typically. And then it has whether they're recurring or not. And the majority of our items in the materials and services are recurring, but we like to identify those so we know they're going to be coming back every year. And we do update the amounts. We don't just plug stuff in. We make sure we have the correct amount for those on an annual basis. So from there, I'm going to make this smaller and hopefully shorter, but hopefully easier to see the numbers. So this is that same page, but I cut out the requested by and the department and the recurring. So here we can see that flows into the operating budget, which this would be the water operating budget that I sent you, the other document. And this is page 12 from the water operating budget. And it shows the same department, the water quality department. And you can see it has the cost of labor, materials and supplies and outside services rolled up. So we can see here that from the materials and services page, the 41,000 sum of the total line items flows over to the budget here. So those two numbers agree, and that's how we roll it up and summarize it into the budget. Next, you can see the outside services of 115,000, and that also rolls up to the 115,000 on page 12 of the water quality department. One thing I did want to note, the cost of labor is shown here, and we won't be presenting the cost of labor at this meeting. We actually haven't finished the labor allocation, the staffing levels, and updating the benefit rates. That's something that's still a work in progress. So these numbers are going to be rough numbers. They're going to change. Unfortunately, they're going to affect some of the analysis today, but I'll try to explain that as I go. So then finally, in the water quality department here on the right side, you can see the total is 212,000. So that rolls up further into the summary by department. So this is also in the water operating budget that I sent you. And this is on page 11 of the water operating budget. So this shows all of the departments summarized into one line, so you have an even further roll up. So in this analysis, what we're going to do now is look at the total budget to budget. And the reason that we do budget to budget and we're not doing budget to actuals because it's only March. We still have 4 months left of the year, so it's a little early to be comparing budget to actuals. So what we do is we compare this year's budget to last year's budget just to get an idea of the major changes between the 2 years. So looking at this, we can see, well, first I should have pointed out the water quality with the 212,000. That's where it rolls up into this line. So you can see those 3 line items, the cost of labor, materials, and outside services that totaled 212,000 roll up to here. And each department has that level of detail. So now that I've rolled it up into summary, I'm actually going to be looking at the changes and then I'll be going backwards. I'll be going back to the detail to show you what caused those changes.
Hey, Wes, I got a question.
Yes.
Is there going to be an opportunity before this comes to the full board for a final vote to have a comparison with this budget versus last year's actual?
So 2021, we typically won't get to the actuals won't be done until like September after the audit typically. So there's no way to have the actual numbers. We will be showing it versus the projected, and we'll update those as we go through the process. So we can probably get those to the end of March, possibly even April, depending on when we make changes to the proposed budget afterwards. So there'll still be at least May and June left of the year before we can, get actual numbers.
Okay. Yeah, I know the timing's a little bit problematic, but I think that there's a lot of benefit into comparing the actuals versus just what we budgeted, because that's a truer picture of what actually took place, So I'd like to see the most recent data that we can prior to the date that we need to make pass the final budget. So, and then Director Boyd Hodgson, you had a question?
Yes, thank you. And I agree with what President Sanella just suggested. I think that would be very valuable. The document that I'm looking at doesn't have the column 20 to 21, 21 to 22 budget to budget comparison. Mine doesn't have that. Did I miss an updated version of the document?
No, you didn't. And I should have mentioned that. I typically do in this meeting, the 20 to 21 comparison is just a column added for the presentation purposes.
Okay, thank you.
And Director Sanella, to your question too on the projected, we keep those, I'll keep updating those as we go through the process. And we also, so even though we have a couple months left, I reach out to all the departments and I typically ask them, what do you expect to spend? So we'll get that as close as possible. And we're happy to give you, we'll provide that analysis as we go through. So we can present that. It just won't be 100% accurate, but it will give us a good idea.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And as I've noted in prior budget seasons, the way the governments do their budgeting is different than the private sector. And one of the biggest differences is that the private sector will, and they'll forecast how much revenue they're going to bring in, and then they'll build their budget or around that forecast. But governments build their budget and then determine how much money they need to tax people or raise rates. And I'd like to know what the actual numbers are. So while we're building our budget, we can keep that in mind, that we need to be as accurate to the previous year's actuals, not previous year's budget, before we roll that out, because it's an interesting process on this side of the house from a government standpoint, that we pass our budget before we set our rates, which is interesting.
Is that codified? Do we have to do it in that order?
It's a good question. It's how it's been done, which that's not always a good thing. But I don't know if that's the standard practice, Glenn or Wes, if you want to tell us about that. But I'm a private sector guy, so we forecast our revenue, and then if we don't have the money, then we live without it. So so it's a little bit different on the private sector.
So typically we do that because as a water district, and we know what we need for cost to provide the services. So we have to establish the cost first. So we look at them and we say, okay, here's what we're going to need to provide stable quality water to our customers. We use that to develop, to then say, okay, we have to collect that amount of money because we're not for profit. So there's no profit built in there. Whatever we need to operate is what we need to collect from our customers. So that collection from our customers is what we call the revenue requirement. We're required to collect that revenue to cover our costs, and only cover our costs. So we take that revenue requirement and then we have to split it out. So yes, we have to, I don't know if we necessarily have to approve our budget before we do it. We could do it around the same time, but we need those costs to establish the rates because we need that revenue requirement number.
Yeah, when you go through the Prop 218 process, you have to have your revenue requirement defined so that you know how to spread those costs. I don't know if it's codified, but it is certainly the industry practice. Every agency does it this way.
So I come from the private sector as well. And so I can appreciate what President Snella is saying. And I feel like, we have an opportunity to lead at Vallecitos. And if there is an opportunity to make sure that we are bearing in mind all the considerations, but at the same time, also bearing in mind customer pinch points and, what we've all been through with COVID-19, I think, if there is an opportunity to do things a little bit differently and still be able to deliver safe and reliable water to our customers, then maybe we should explore that. I think just because things have always been done a certain way doesn't mean that they have to continue being done that way. But I think it's worth examining.
I agree. I'd be open to hearing any sort of suggestions that staff can come up with on how we can align the rate setting process and the budget setting process a little closer together.
Okay, so looking at the total budget to budget for water, the requests are for 2022 are $453,000 higher than 2021, or 3.5%. So that's the total. And unfortunately, that does include the estimated labor again, which has not been completed. So it will change based on that. Hopefully it'll go down, and I know that it will already, but because I've already been working on it. But then looking at the pumping department, so the major changes for the 453,000, and I'll go through these one at a time, and then I'll go into the detail of each one. So pumping is budgeted to decrease by $105,000. Transmission distribution is budgeted to increase by $141,000. And we have meters budgeted to increase by $163,000. Customer accounts is budgeted to decrease by $136,000. Engineering is budgeted to increase by $105,000. And then general and administrative is budgeted to increase by $117,000. So let's take a look at the budget for pumping. It's budgeted to decrease by $105,000, and that's mainly as a result of the outside repair and services being the budget being lower this year by $93,000. We had I'll call it a special project, but I'll look for more information from Ed from last year. We budgeted for an arc flash labeling. I think it was for property, plant, and equipment. And that was about $120,000 last year. That project was completed, but it was a one-time project. So now that we're seeing the budget decrease again back to normal levels and decrease by $93,000 for this year. I don't know if you have questions about that or if Ed wants to expand on what the arc flash was.
Yep, I'd like to hear from Ed.
Yeah, the arc flash analysis is a OSHA requirement, and it's part of the NFPA 70E requirement. That's the official term of that. And it basically, we have to have an electrical engineer look at the master control center panels where all the power is coming into our pump stations, any facility that has the potential for an arc flash, which is a plasma fire that burns hotter than the sun. When something goes wrong inside one of those panels and you open it up, it's extremely deadly. So we have to have an analysis done, and each of the panels has to be labeled accordingly. We did everything in the admin building a couple years ago. Metal Arc reclamation facility was completed this year, and so we're doing all of the water pump stations. Right now, we just actually awarded or got the bids back. We'll be taking the contract to the board shortly to award the contract to the winning bidder, and so that'll be done this year. And then we just have a few more stations left after that. But it is a requirement, and it did spike the outside services for pumping this year, and it's coming back down for the next year.
Thank you, Ed.
So moving along, we have transmission distribution is budgeted to increase by 141,000. And if we look at the details, this is on page 12 of the water operations budget. And you can see here that the outside repair is budgeted to increase by $155,000, which is causing that increase. And if we look at the materials and services details to see where that came from, we can see that it's the result of two different items. We have the installation of fall protection equipment for all remaining water vaults, and I believe there are over 30 of those. And then we have emergency payment concrete repairs due to mainline breaks. And again, if Ed wants to expand on this as far as with the fall protection equipment, the mainline breaks are probably self-explanatory, but yeah. I'll turn it over to Ed.
Yeah, the funds for the mainline breaks are actually the same as last year. So the biggest increase is in the fall protection. So another OSHA standard, we have to have specific equipment anytime we're going to traverse more than 6 feet underground to protect staff and meet those OSHA requirements. We have taken care of the requirements at most of our tank sites. We have some of the more dangerous vaults already done, and this is for the remainder of them. We've spread it out over a few years to try not to spike anything too much, but it's critical that we get this done. The other item that I'm looking at that kind of spiked it a little bit too this year was for weed abatement, and you'll see that throughout our budget. We used to have CAL FIRE, their convict crews, I guess you would call them. We used to be able to clear our easements using their crews. They're the ones that go out and fight the fires, and very good work for mere dollars for them to work on a daily basis. And unfortunately, CAL FIRE has closed that program. So now, we only have 2 landscapers, and they can't handle all of the miles and miles of easements. So we're having to hire an outside company that costs quite a bit more. And that's where you see the $27,000 there for weed abatement. That was a $2,000 item, I think, before. That was $6,000. $6,000 was in that budget before. So quite a big increase, and it's all over the place on our budget.
Okay, thank you, Ed. Director Boyd Hodgson. Oh, you're on mute.
Thank you. So the city of San Marcos uses a company. I see them out doing that kinds of, weed abatement all the time. Is there any possibility that we could partner with them and use the same company or anything like that to try to reduce the cost?
We could certainly look into that. I'm not sure if they're using an actual landscape company or which company they're using.
It's called Connell, Connell.
I've seen the company that they use.
Okay.
We have to go out to bid, obviously, if we're going to
Okay.
get a private contractor. But we'll certainly be talking with them to see what kind of services they're getting from O'Connell and take a look at that.
Hey, Wes.
Yeah, so next on the line, and Ed brought up, you can tell Ed's gone into a great amount of detail in going through the operations budget, and I want to give him a chance to talk about a lot of the work that they've done and their budget to budget comparisons, because he looks at this. I mean, they start in probably October putting together their budget and these detailed line items. And while I'm kind of glazing over it and going through it at a higher level and just looking at the bigger changes, I would like to give Ed a chance to talk about what they did to keep their budget to an absolute minimum. So Ed, if you'd like to.
Sure. It's certainly not a one-person project. We do start very early compared to the rest of the district because so much of the operations and materials and services budget is in operations. Our official start date is always December 1st, but my supervisors, they start hearing from me long before then. We start looking at different ways we can control costs. And so all 6 of the O&M supervisors, we meet quite a few times starting in December. They start letting me know what areas they need, what projects we're going to complete. And it's always our goal from year to year to try to hold the budget as flat as possible. And I know it looks easy when you're seeing all these numbers in front of you, but let me tell you, it is a lot of work. They do take this very seriously, and we triage. So there might be a piece of equipment we need, or 2 or 3 pieces of equipment, but we know we really can't get those all purchased in 1 year, because if we do, it'll spike the budget. So we'll triage which one's in the worst shape. Let's try to get that this year, push the other ones to the next year. Same thing for these projects. We try not to have all these projects all in 1 year. So you might see expenses go up 1 year in transit distribution, and the next year it goes down and it goes back up somewhere else. So we try to triage it the best we can, and the overall budget is always our goal to try and hold as flat as possible.
Thank you, Ed.
Yeah, and Ed, with your total operating budget without considering labor, you said actually went down from year to year, right?
Yes. So overall, both water and sewer, and this is just for operations and maintenance. This doesn't include the other departments that are part of this budget. The O&M budget went down just a little more than $50,000 overall for O&M.
Thanks, Ed. So then next I'm going to move into the meters department, and here's where we get to hear from special guest Chris Tapia, hopefully. But meters is budgeted to increase by $163,000. And the reason for that increase, if you look on page 13 of the water operations budget, we can see that materials and supplies and outside services both increased 67,000 and 29,000. And they're both for the same reason. And if we go to the materials and services sheet on page 4 of the water materials and services, you can see that there is a project for this year that we're proposing. It's a meter testing and replacement program. The district has historically been reactive in replacing meters. And what I mean by that is we basically, if a meter fails, we go out and we replace it. And meters are how we record our water flow, how we get our water sales, and how we bill our customers. So it's really important that we know how old our meters are. We make sure they're functioning correctly so that we're able to bill and collect all of our revenue. So the problem with being reactive is, one of the problems is that the meters age, and as they age, they slow down. So the water's flowing through them, but they're slowing down. They're not recording the actual amount of water flowing through, and we're not collecting the appropriate amount of revenue. So what we're proposing is to do a proactive meter testing and replacement program where we look at older meters or meters that have higher usage, and we do it by cycle, and we pull a certain number of meters and that are older, have them tested and see how they're performing. And we can kind of use that to identify areas that have greater needs for meter replacements. And I'll let Chris expand on that a little bit so you can hear from a new guy and I'm not just talking all the time.
Good afternoon. Happy to be here with you guys. I am new to Vallecitos, started in December, and but I've been in the water industry for over 16 years. And just exactly what Wes was mentioning, our older meter population, they are mechanical meters. They have an internal measuring element that spins as water is pushed through it. So if you think of a pinwheel or a propeller plane, as that water pushes through, there's a gear ratio that turns the old odometer looking dials or even a digital register. Over time, the water quality or the sheer volume of water that has ran through that measuring element wears it down and becomes less accurate. So we've, by rectifying that with a new meter, we are getting better on our water loss, and we're getting a true charge for the water used. So we're bringing back some lost revenue there. This program, like Wes said, is to identify when we can do a upgrade, as we call it, a meter upgrade, rather than just doing it simply based off of age or simply based off of throughput usage. These meters that we're going to have tested will build a profile and give us a data sample to identify if other makes and models should be prioritized higher than a meter that simply is just old, or a meter that has a lot of usage on it. So this is really to give us that analytical data to identify where we should put our efforts in meter upgrades. But another benefit of this is these meter tests that we'll receive will satisfy the annual state water loss audit that is due every October to the state. This testing of a representative sample of our system will definitely earn us some points on that water audit. So there's a couple of benefits here other than allowing us to know where to focus our efforts.
Director Boyd Hodgson.
Thanks for that explanation, Chris, and welcome to Vallecitos. My question is, I'm sure, like in other industries, meters generally are evolving more, becoming smarter. There's new technology coming down the pike. I don't know all the ins and outs of that, but I wonder if, is it smart to spend this money now to do kind of a sort of a Band-Aid on some of these meters that are failing? Or are we in the very near term future thinking about upgrading, sort of a wholesale upgrade of our meters to a smarter technology? So we should save this money now and spend it on the larger project of upgrading to more advanced meters.
It's a great question. We would actually be upgrading to that more advanced technology through this program.
Okay.
We would be removing mechanical meters, and in their place, we'd be putting in what is called a solid state meter. Solid state water meters have no moving parts, so they can use acoustics like ultrasonic, or the meter we are using, the iPearl by Sensus, uses electromagnetic sensors to identify exactly what the velocity of water is that's going through that meter. And it converts that velocity into a flow rate, which is then displayed at the meter's register. The mechanical meters, brand new out of the box, can only accurately record flows of down to 1/4 gallon a minute, whereas our new iPearl meters, they can record flows as low as 1/10 of a gallon per minute. A benefit of the iPearl is it doesn't have that internal measuring element that is known to fail and lose accuracy. They're quoted by the manufacturer to hold accuracy for up to 20 years.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Hey, Chris, I got another question for you. One of the, I guess it was a personal goal, but I know the board's discussed it as well, is having or giving our customers the capability at some point in the future to be able to download a Vallecitos app to their cell phone and be able to watch, almost live their water usage, or at least any given day, where they stand with their water usage, or if they're on vacation and water shouldn't be flowing through the system, but it is, they'd be able to see that. Will these new meters that you're looking at be compatible either currently or in the future with some sort of application technology?
Absolutely. The entire district currently is on what's called an AMR system, and that's essentially a drive-by system. The meters are connected to radios that broadcast the meter reads via radio frequency. The problem is we would have to erect a fixed base network tower that would collect these hourly interval readings that are broadcast and then backhaul them back to the district. Then we can display them to the customer. The problem is with 45 square miles of service territory across multiple jurisdictions, it's probably difficult to find locations to erect or to mount the technology needed to gather these radio broadcasts. So what we do is we have a vehicle that has it's a vehicle gateway that has a small tower, if you will, built into it. And we drive the neighborhoods and pick up the reads once every 30 days. We can explore the option of having a propagation study ran by our meter manufacturer, where they will quote how many towers and where they would need to be placed to collect all of these reads. But again, my feeling is that if that has been done, it's probably been identified that towers need to go in locations that are not district owned, because we don't own the street lights or the ballparks to hang off of a foul pole or something like that. Our assets where we can hang these fixed base towers are probably limited.
Okay. So it definitely sounds like there's a lot more discussion around that in the future. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Chris. So that's the meter testing and replacement program, and that's our new meter services supervisor. It's pretty impressive. He's only been here since December.
Very impressive.
So moving on, the next thing we're going to look at is the customer accounts. Customer accounts is budgeted to decrease by 136,000. And the reason for that is the uncollectible accounts is budgeted to decrease by 163,000. And during budget year 2021, we developed the COVID-19 financial plan. And part of that plan was that we would increase our budget for 10 times our normal bad debt expense, with the expectation that it would increase due to COVID. But continuing on with that financial plan, we expected to see it start to decrease after that. So we did a 10 times in 2021, and then it was to go down to half, and then just to keep reducing until we got back to normal levels over a year and a half to 2 year period. So this is just a result of seeing the bad debt expense decrease. We're budgeting for $163,000 less this year, and you can see projected's coming at 214. So we may even adjust that a little bit lower if we look at it further and determine that we don't necessarily need that much. But right now we're in line with our COVID-19 financial plan, and we should see a decrease in that uncollectible accounts. So next, the engineering department, the budget is to increase by $105,000 for fiscal year 2022. And that's a result of labor. And as I mentioned, we're still working on staffing and labor allocations and benefits. And engineering has actually got 3 positions that are open for recruitment right now. So they've had some turnover in their department. So this number will definitely change, and we will be presenting that at the next finance committee meeting to go over the salaries and benefits. So G&A, general and administrative, increase is budgeted to increase by 117,000. And again, that's the product of a labor projection increase. And this will change. G&A has a lot of labor. There's, it's $3 million because a lot of the district either works in G&A or spends a percentage of their time in general and administrative activities. So this is a large labor number, and the 74,000 will change. Not sure where it's going to go yet, but we'll find out at the next committee meeting. It keeps us on our toes. So that's the water operating budget. I'll stop there and see if there are any questions before I move on to the wastewater operating budget.
Okay, I don't see any questions.
So the wastewater operating budget, this is page 21 of the sewer operating budget document that was sent to you. And it's the same thing that's rolled up all by department, and we'll be breaking down the details. So if you look at the total for the sewer operating budget, it's budgeted to decrease by $36,000 this year, or 0.3%. And that is a result of two major changes. Collection and conveyance is budgeted to decrease by 188,000. This is one of the departments, again, that's I'll talk about in a minute, but it's affected by labor. So we don't expect to see this decrease of 188. It's going to be more like 97, 95. And then engineering is budgeted to increase by 123,000. So looking at collections and conveyance, this is page 22 of your wastewater operations budget. And this is the breakdown of the collections and conveyance department. And we can see the major change is a decrease in labor of 207,000. One of the positions that we have for recruitment right now hasn't been filled and was not included in this projection. So that one position in full will increase the decrease in the projection. So that will change. And again, I told you I'd say it like 6 times. We'll talk about it at the next finance committee meeting. I apologize. So moving on, engineering is budgeted to increase by 123,000. This is page 23 of the wastewater operations budget, and we can see that it's budgeted to increase by 123 as a result of $94,000 increase in outside services. And we'll go into the detail on the materials and services. So the materials and services, this is page 6 of the sewer materials and services sheet. And here we can see 2 items being budgeted: the energy management study update and the North County Recycle Water Coalition. And Mr. James Gumpel is here, our engineering manager, to talk about these 2 items.
Thank you, Wes. So the first item.
Hey, James,
Sorry.
if you could just hold on for a second. Director Boyd Hodgson, please.
Sorry to interrupt. I have a sort of a process improvement suggestion. As we are looking through these documents, because we're going to be looking at these documents quite a lot, and Wes, you're very familiar with all of these lines and the order and the flow of everything in these. But as a new board member and as someone that's trying to follow along, what would be extremely helpful is if you would number the lines on the pages. I've seen that done in other budgets. It's very efficient. So if you say, this is on page 21, line 20, I know exactly where to go. I don't have to sort of scroll down and then all of a sudden you've moved on to something else and I haven't found what you're talking about yet. So I think that would be really, really helpful so that we can make sure that we're all following along, and I'm able to appreciate all the work that you've done on this. Thank you.
I will do that. Not a problem.
Okay, so really quick, the energy management study. So the study, the energy management study, is actually an update. So we did an energy management study in 2010, 2011, and we updated it in 2013. Since then, a lot has changed at the district. We have a new district-wide solar array system that's going to be basically a public-private partnership going forward that should be online before the end of this fiscal year. We also secured several grants, and they haven't been confirmed yet, but we're going to get over, looks like $2 to $3 million of major Tesla battery packs for several of our sites. If the funding goes through, then that will also make a difference. Since 2013, the other big difference that happened is SDG&E completely changed their rate model and their rate structure. You've seen it personally at your homes. The new time of use. Weekends used to be all low power time, or basically off peak or super off peak time. The model has changed to account for what they call the duck curve because a lot of people are generating their own solar electricity. So it's time to go ahead and put in a new energy management study at which we look at all of our sites, we look at our rates, we look at what's coming online, and then we basically reprioritize how we better and more efficiently use energy at our sites and save our customers by trying to reduce the energy consumption. So this is basically a study for that. That's the majority of that increase. The North County Recycled Water Coalition, for the board members here who may or may not know, we're part of a coalition with 8 other water agencies, water and sewer agencies. And we've been so since about 2011, and there's a lobbyist agreement to get joined together and get lobbyists to help us out with getting funding from Washington for major project, recycled water, possibly either IPR, indirect potable reuse, or direct potable reuse, where we convert wastewater into drinking water in the future and increase at the plant. So we've already secured grants. We've gotten over $500,000 in grants for Vallecitos, just under 480,000 or so for Vallecitos, which helped us with several projects down at Meadowlark and also at our lift station. And this is just a continuation to fund that lobbyist agreement.
Okay.
Thank you, James.
Thank you, Wes.
So that's the end of the sewer presentation. I'm happy to take any questions before we move on to the budget calendar.
Hey, Wes, I have another question. James was talking about doing an energy study, which I think is a good idea. Probably need to look at that from time to time. But a significant part of our budget, and certainly the significant part that goes up every year, is our labor. And as a board member, we're not working there 40 hours a week with you guys side by side, so we don't always see everything that everybody's doing. So we really have to depend on the management team to kind of level set with regards to labor needs. And almost we have to, you're asking us to approve the budget, and we're kind of taking your word for it. But when was the last time, if ever, the district's had a third party kind of look at our human resources, just to kind of give us an outside perspective or a second opinion, if you will? Has that ever happened?
So I think General Manager Pro might want to comment on this, but I know that we do class and comp studies, and we did one during the last MOU, and we typically do it during every MOU. So HR goes out, hires a consultant. They do a class and comp study, which is a class comparative study for each position at the district and salary levels, and they get information and compare how we're the overall salary levels. So it's done with every MOU.
Yeah, Wes is right. We're always trying to make sure that our salaries are in line with the market that we're in. One thing we haven't done, which is where I thought you were going with the question, President Sanella, we have not gone out and brought in an outside party to see if our staffing levels are appropriate. So that's a very hard comparison to make. I don't know. I'm sure there's consultants out there that would do that, but my guess is you'd find out we're on the low end of the staffing levels, but we'd be happy if the board wants us to take a look.
I'm kind of thinking out loud as we go through this, because I don't think you mentioned it this time, Wes, but I know in previous presentations before, you've talked about how much of our budget is water purchases and labor. And if you can refresh my memory of what it was, a very high percentage, right? And if you happen to know what that is, if you can share it, that'd be great. And I know this is a scary topic when you're talking about staffing levels and stuff like that. And my intention is certainly not to scare anybody, but we're required to have these conversations in public, and it's just the way it is. And so I'm not necessarily saying that we need to do it. I'm just thinking that if it's never been done, that might be something that a board might want to have a workshop on to kind of look into that and see if that's something that we should be doing, just to make sure that when we're being asked to pass these budgets and these annual increases to the labor pool, that we at least know and have a comfort level that we have two opinions. We have our internal team, which is great, but then we've had maybe once a decade or something, we had a third party come and kind of validate that for us. So again, I'm not saying that we need to do this right now. I'm not saying that we need to, it's not an urgent matter. It's just kind of something that perhaps as a forward-looking future workshop, if we have one once COVID's over, it might be a good topic to have the board kind of hash out a little bit.
Okay.
Well, and I will mention, we presented, we do present every year as far as the salaries and changes and levels, as far as salaries and benefits themselves. And the board has done an excellent job in looking at these costs and finding ways to save on benefits, PERS, for example. And our staffing levels have actually gone down. I think in 2015, we had 115, or it might have been 2014, we had 115 staff. They've gone down to 108. So we've kept staffing levels lower. We've kept cost low. Over the last 5 years, I think we show a very small increase. And there's a graph that I'll show, and I can actually, I think I'll be bringing it to the next presentation to show where salaries and benefits are, at least for this budget year, compared to the previous 5 years. And we've kept them very steady, and I think we've done an excellent job keeping those at a minimum.
Thank you, Wes. Director Boyd Hodgson.
Thank you. I think it's also important for us to be willing to sort of turn the microscope inward and look at what we as a board are costing the district. So what I would really appreciate also understanding at some point is, how much, I see something called director's fees. I see something called meetings and seminars, and I know that part of it's wastewater and part of it's water. But I think it's really important for us as elected officials and for the public to know, here's how much the board members are costing the district. I think having that information available, including, what's paid for insurance, what's paid for reimbursements or per diems and things like that, is important to know. So I'd like to see that presented as well.
Yeah, we can do that. I believe it's every quarter we include that in the board packet where it shows director compensation and it breaks it down into all sorts of levels, whether it's per diems, travel, insurance, things like that. But,
yeah, that requires me to go in and add it all up though.
okay.
So if we can like, sort of presented in a package, how much for the fiscal year last year was,
okay,
was paid out to board members, and this much went for covering insurance for the board members. This much went for, per diem. This much went for, paying for us to go to seminars and things like that.
Okay.
Thank you.
We could do that.
Thank you. So the next steps in the budget process, in April, we will continue to incorporate the operating expenses into the budget and revise and refine them, make the changes to the salaries and benefits, and make any changes to the operations that we feel that we can change. And then on April 12th, we have a tentative finance committee meeting, but from what I understand, there may be some scheduling conflicts with that. So we may need to look at a different date. However, sometime in early April, we can probably schedule that meeting. And at that meeting, as promised, we'll present the payroll estimates and staffing, and we can bring forward all the analysis we just discussed, as well as the board compensation. And then we will also be talking about the capital budget requests. So we'll have Ed and James back for that meeting. Should be exciting again. And then on April 26th, we have another tentative finance committee meeting. At that meeting, we'll discuss any board requested or committee requested items from the previous meetings. And we also have a tentative cost of service study update scheduled for that meeting. Then in May is when we really start to put together the proposed budget. So we'll have the first draft of the proposed budget. And using that, once we have the operating and the capital together, we can start looking at the reserve projections for the next 5 years and 10 years beyond that. And then on May 3rd, we'll have tentatively on May 3rd, we'll have a finance committee meeting, and we'll talk about the draft proposed budget and any other board requested items. And May 19th, we will bring the draft proposed budget to a board workshop with the full board to discuss the proposed budget. And then finally in June, we will make any revisions or refinements to the proposed budget and hopefully come up with an excellent product to bring to the board on June 2nd for approval. So that's the budget process. If there are no questions, I'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the auditor agreement.
Okay. Thank you, Wes, and thank you for the rest of the staff who participated. Appreciate it.
So end of the budget party page. See you next time. So now the auditor agreement. Probably not as much fun, but it's on the agenda. So I got to remember what the code is. The district is required to have an annual audit performed by an independent auditor according to California Government Code Section 26909. So every 3 to 5 years, we go out for auditors and we have to do it through a competitive bid process. So our current auditors were selected through a competitive bid process in 2018. And just to show the results of that bid process, here's sort of the summary of the ranking. So we look at all the proposals, we look at auditor resumes, experience, other districts or agencies that they audit, the number of audit hour, the partner hours that will be on the audit, because the higher up, usually the, you know, it's more quality if you have the partner or the manager on here longer. And then we look at cost as well. And cost isn't necessarily the number one factor, but it is a factor in the equation. So this shows our rating from the auditors in 2018. We had 7 auditors submit proposals, and of those 7, Davis Fire was by far the highest rated, and they just happen to be lowest cost overall as well. So they've been our auditor since 2018. They performed very well from, I think the board's been very happy with them. They're not as nice to staff, but that's okay, because that's kind of, we need that so we can find ways to improve. And I guess auditors aren't supposed to be nice to us anyway, but we like them okay. And they came highly recommended by all the references. They're also the auditors for the Water Authority and several other agencies. So as part of that process, we do actually call the references, talk to them about their experiences, and ask them the same set of questions when we before we select them. And overall, we had a total savings of $12,200 over the last 3 years as compared to our previous audit contract. And the current agreement includes an option to extend their agreement for 2 years. So in considering this option, we looked at the any regulations that might apply to extending it. And one of the major ones would be the GFOA for audit, best practices for audit procurement. I know this is really small. I'll point out the one area I'm going to talk about. It's probably really hard to read. But for those of you who don't know, the GFOA is the Government Finance Officers Association. They set best practices for agencies and governmental entities internationally. So most places follow their best practices. And their best practices for audit procurement say that down here on the bottom line towards the bottom, governmental entities should enter into multi-year agreements of at least 5 years in duration when obtaining the services of independent auditors. So at least 5 years in duration. They say that they can take on, you know, a variety of different forms, meaning we could do a 3, 1 and 1, a 3 and 2. We could do 1-year contracts, however you want to do it. But typically they like you to retain an auditor for 5 years at a minimum. And a lot of that has to do with experience too. If auditors come in, the first few years, they're getting familiar with the clients, they're learning how they operate, they're trying to understand their controls. They can't really provide much valuable feedback. Well, I mean, I'm sure they can, but it just, once they're familiar with you, they can actually provide more valuable feedback and ways to improve your operations and things you can do differently once they know your operations. So that's a GFOA. So then another sort of regulation or guidance as far as auditor selection and retainment would be the Assembly Bill. And I know you can't read this at all because I can barely read it, but that's why I summarized it in my note here. Assembly Bill 1345 limits existing audit partners to a maximum of 6 years. So that audit partner on the engagement can only be in one place for 6 years. After that, they can rotate and we can extend them further, but we're required to rotate auditors at least every 6 years, or audit partners, not the auditors. So those are the only real limitations to selecting the auditor. So it looks like there's no reason why we couldn't extend our existing contract by the 2 years. So the next thing we want to look at would be the cost. If we extend them for 2 years, how much is it going to cost us? So in their proposal, in our agreement, it says if the contract is extended by additional years, the fees would increase by a nominal 2% per year. So our fee for 1920 was $24,940. For 2021, it would be $25,440, and then $25,950 for 21-22. So that's just a 2% increase. And if we compare that to the original proposals submitted by other audit firms, you can see here that in 2021, they're still cheaper than 5 out of the 6 other firms that submitted proposals. And in 21-22, there'd be 4 out of the 6. So it's still a very low cost for the auditors. They've done a great job, and there's really no reason why we couldn't extend. So with that said, staff recommends extending the auditor agreement, hopefully with the support of the Finance Committee.
Yeah, and Wes, this would need to go to the board, right?
Yes.
So as staff starts to prepare the staff report, we'd like to include a recommendation. And if the Finance Committee has a recommendation to go in that staff report, we'd incorporate it in there.
Director Boyd Hodgson.
Thank you. This sounds like it should be a pretty easy decision, but I am concerned about something that you said about them not being nice to the staff. So I wonder if there is something that we could do to try to, I don't know exactly what that means, but I would hate for it to mean that they are being unprofessional or intimidating people. I would not want someone working with our staff doing that. So I would like to hear a little bit more about that. I don't know if this is the meeting for that or if that's like a conversation that is wider, but I would not want to, that gives me a little bit of pause, even if their work is exceptional. Secondly, I would like to know if the principals are the partners, if anyone can tell me if they are woman-owned or if they have people of color working at the partner level of this firm. Thank you.
Wes, let me handle the first part. I think Wes was just completely joking. What he meant is they're really tough on us. They're nice. They're very professional. We get along well with them, but they ask a lot of questions. They're really good auditors. They know the right questions to ask. And that's what he was saying. So Wes, correct me if I'm wrong there.
Yeah, I try to be funny sometimes and I'm just not very funny. I apologize for that.
Well, my concern is real. So if it does come to that, please know that you can always bring it to the board because you have a willing listener about that.
And Wes, can you talk about who our partner assigned to our project is now, please?
Yes. So two of the partners that we've had two partners we actually switched over last year. So for the first year, we had Jennifer Farr, who was one of the owners of the company, Davis Farr. And then this year we had Shannon Ayala. So we've had two female partners over the last 2 years. I am not sure exactly what the makeup of the entire firm is, but that's been our partner experience.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just add that I'm comfortable with making a recommendation from the Finance Committee to continue with Davis Farr if Director Boyd Hodgson agrees. I've been very impressed with them. I've had in the 6 years or so that I've been on the board, I've had the opportunity to work, I think, with two other auditing firms. They were, everybody we've worked with have always been fine. But I feel like my experience and interaction with Davis Farr has been just a little step better than the other ones I've worked with. So I've been very happy with them, and their prices are definitely they were the low bidder when we went out to bid 3 years ago, and it looks like we're able to leverage some of those the efficiencies that they have by continuing for 2 more years. And so I think quality of work, the value that they're providing to our district, and their overall price, really speaks volumes to keeping them on board for 2 more years.
I agree.
Right, so, okay, sorry to interrupt there. So if it's okay with the board, we'll include that in the recommendation with the staff report that goes to the board, that the Finance Committee supports staff's recommendation to extend the term of the agreement.
Right. Thank you.
And that concludes my presentation for today. We're moving on to the next topic, and I'll stop sharing my screen.
Okay,
Yeah.
Glenn, we're gonna go on to item number 3, the CWA/NWD lawsuit refund. And I just want the record to note that we did receive 2 written correspondence, one from a member of the public, Miss Martin, and another one from the legal firm. I forget the name of it, but it's the legal firm for the Golden Door. And we've received those 2. And I've read them.
Latham and Watkins is the name of the
Yep,
legal.
thank you.
So
Okay.
when was the second one sent in? When did we receive the second comment?
Shortly before the meeting started, and I sent an email to you and Director Sinella to provide it. It came in literally 15 minutes before the meeting started. So
Okay, it's unfortunate because I was in like back-to-back meetings, so I didn't see that email. So I don't know the content of that email.
Yeah, I guess doesn't sound like I'm going to read them, but both emails express the opinion that the monies involved in the refund from the water authority should be used to offset future water costs. Neither one expressed an indication about refunds to past current or previous customers.
And Glenn, I'll add that I believe both of those folks who submitted those letters are in the audience, and so they are more than welcome to speak at this time if they would like to. They certainly don't have to, but they're welcome to.
I don't see either hand going up, and so I'll make a short presentation and turn it back over to the board or the committee. Ms. Martin's hand did just go up. If
Okay.
you'd like me to enable her mic.
Please do. Thank you.
All right. Ms. Martin, go ahead.
Yes, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes. Ma'am.
Yes.
Yes, I do want to encourage the entire board to look at a lower rate increase for all of us ratepayers. But I did raise my hand during the budget discussion on meters, and my raised hand was not recognized.
You can speak or ask a question now, Ms. Martin. I apologize. I don't have the ability to see the hands, so but you're certainly welcome to speak on that at this time too, if you'd like.
Yes, I would like.
We can try to answer your question for you.
Yes, could we see again the screen on the meters?
Wes, can you bring that up quickly?
Yeah, the budget page.
Yes, wait. I'd like to go back to a different screen. It had much more numbers. I'm very curious, as in the two different sections of the meters, there are costs for, I guess, because this isn't the correct screen that I need to see. It's a screen that has the testing and parts. There it is. That's the screen. The upper part of the screen on materials and supplies, it shows testing and replacement programs, meters and parts. And we also have just below that 2 or 3 lines, meter parts and inventory. And I don't know why we're listing meter parts twice.
Okay, thank you for your question. Wes, could you please answer that?
Yes, happy to. So the meter testing and replacement program, the meters and parts for that is specifically related to the approximately 300 meters that we're going to be or proposing to replace as part of the testing program. So what we're going to be doing is going out and per cycle pulling about 20 meters per cycle identified on age and usage, and we're going to specifically have them tested. So we'll have to put in a new meter. So the parts are related specifically to that program. So that 56,000 is for those meters. The $50,000 below you'll see as a recurring item. That's our normal meter replacement usage. So as meters die, and this includes all of them, and really that $50,000, we have a lot of top plates that have batteries in them. And they're about $800 per top plate, and they're coming to the end of their 10-year useful life. A lot of them are dying, we've been experiencing. So we've budgeted $50,000 for the year to replace those top plates, normal meters. So this includes everything, the 3/4 inch, 5/8. Well, I think we're moving away from 5/8, but anything above that, 1 inch, 1.5 inch, all meter replacements as part of our normal operations are included in that $50,000 line item.
And the top plate refers to the part of the meter that actually transmits the signal. So it collects the data and then it sends it via radio. It's just called a top plate.
Then the second part of my question is, still on this same page, we have meters outside services, and we have meter testing and replacement tests for $15,000. Isn't the test part of the materials and supplies in the upper part of the description of materials?
No, so the top part, so the top part is just for the meters and parts. So that's just the meters and parts themselves that we'll have to replace as part of the removing the meter and putting a new one in. The testing is actually, we're going to take that meter and send it off to be tested, and it's going to cost about $50 per meter to test those meters, to find out if they're accurate, to identify which meters we may want to pull in the future for replacement.
And the reason we send it out is because you have to have a certified test bench. You can't just do it yourself unless you want to pay for the cost of constructing the bench and getting certified and all that. So there's outside firms that do this all the time. So we want to take advantage of their capacity.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. I appreciate the opportunity to go back to the meters. Thank you.
You're welcome. And I apologize for your hand raised before.
Okay, Glenn, we'll go ahead and kick, unless we have any other speakers on item number 3, we'll go ahead and start with the staff presentation.
Yeah, it doesn't look like it. So I'll try to be brief and allow the Finance Committee more time to have a discussion. So at last week's board meeting, the March 17th meeting, the board directed that this item be presented to the Finance Committee for discussion. And you may recall, we knew we had enough time to place it on the agenda, but we haven't had a lot of time to do an in-depth analysis. So this item would eventually go back to the board for final direction, but they wanted the Finance Committee to take a look at it first. So you'll recall that the courts did find that Metropolitan Water District had overcharged the County Water Authority by $44.4 million between 2011 to 2014. And based on the County Water Authority's member agencies' contributions during that time period, that 4-year time period, our share is about $1.6 million. CWA has sent that amount to Vallecitos, and we've cashed the check. Basically, it's in the reserves. And there's really no time element associated with deciding what to do, other than if the board wants to make a decision in conjunction with the budget, there's that time element. The Water Authority will likely also be getting about $13 million in attorney's fees as a result, but they have not yet made a decision what they're going to do with that $13 million. And there's still some pending legal challenges for 2014 to 2018, and that will likely bring in another $30 million. The same issues were at stake in the court, in the lawsuit, so we believe that the same findings will be made, and when you do the same kind of math with that next 4-year period, it comes out to be a little bit less, about 2/3 of what was decided in the first one. And again, the court hasn't decided yet, and the Water Authority hasn't decided yet what they will do with that $30 million, but I would assume they'd follow the same practice. So basically, the money can be used at Vallecitos' discretion. There are some restrictions. As I mentioned at the meeting on last Wednesday, it cannot be used for wastewater purposes, and it cannot be used for capacity fund projects. We did receive an email from Tom Scaglione after the last meeting implying that Vallecitos may use it to address capacity fund deficit, even though we specifically mentioned during last meeting that it could not be used for that purpose. I think he's just trying to intentionally mislead the public with the statements. So what can the money be used for? One thing it can be used for is reducing the revenue requirement, or how much money we need to operate the water replacement enterprise. So here's some examples. You can apply it towards future water supply purchase costs. You can call it like a rate stabilization fund. So if the Water Authority raises its rates, we can use this money to offset those costs. You could use it to pay for a capital improvement project if it's a water replacement project. And you can use it to pay for like normal operating expenses. So salaries and benefits, our PERS, unfunded accrued liability, all the information that Wes was talking about, the materials, supplies, and services, as long as it's in the water replacement side of things, fleet. You could use it to retire any water replacement outstanding debt balances, but we don't currently have any debt on the water replacement side. So basically, almost anything in the water replacement budget, you could use these funds for. So one other thing that you could use it for is to refund or credit towards customers. That certainly raises some issues. Which customers? So are we talking today's customers or the customers that actually paid the money into the system back in 2011 through 2014? You'd have to figure out how to allocate that 1.6 million amongst all those customers. Probably some method similar to what the Water Authority did to try to figure out how to allocate it. We think there'd be a tremendous difficulty in tracking down former customers if we went with that approach. The Water Authority didn't have to worry about that. They've got 24 member agencies and most of us aren't going anywhere. So they know how to track us down. But we're talking over a decade ago that these monies were first received. There'd be a lot of administrative costs associated with the analysis, figuring out who to pay it back to, how much gets paid back to, tracking down former customers, because a lot of these customers probably aren't even current customers of the water district. We estimate those costs maybe a couple $100,000 at the end of the day. And on a refund or credit, we'd have to figure out, would we want to apply it as a credit to the account or just a straight cash refund to the customers? And applying it as a credit would address any outstanding balances associated with an account. So if a customer was past due or delinquent in their accounts, their portion of the refund could go towards that delinquent amount. So we did a little bit of analysis in the time we had, and I'll walk through that real quickly. So if the board were to apply those towards water supply costs, so basically to offset future costs to keep rates low, the analysis we did is we took the $1.6 million of credit, we divided it by the 6.1 million units of water that we sell in a typical year, and that's about a 26-cent per unit credit or credit towards during any one fiscal year. So an average single family home customer uses 13 units per month, 12 months a year, they would realize a $40.92 benefit over the course of 1 year. There's some rounding in there, depends if, are you rounding it to exactly 26 cents or carrying it past the decimal point, but about $41 per customer if you did it that way. So, and that's if you did it to lower their water rates or water costs going forward. If you applied it as a credit, the single family home customers would see a credit or a refund of about $72.50 if you split the $1.6 million evenly amongst all customers. So it doesn't matter what size meter or how much water they purchased over a period of time, every meter is treated equally. It would come to be about $72.50 per customer. If you did try to factor in the size of the meter, which is an indicator of how much money they paid into the system, it's not directly the money, but it's using what we call meter equivalent approach. Each typical single family customer would get a $55.16 credit. So that's probably about the range you'd see if you're looking as a credit. There are many legal issues associated with the refund and credit approach, and primarily it's with identifying who would receive the funds and in what percentage. And in the cost to do this in a way that's legally defensible would take considerable time and money. And again, as I said before, it would reduce the amount available for the beneficial use. And we did check with our attorneys. You cannot use these funds just to benefit a specific class of customers, such as those that are in current financial difficulties. So you couldn't use it to establish a COVID relief fund, for example, because they may not be the ones who contributed the money in the first place. So you basically be reallocating funds amongst the customers. So those people getting the benefits aren't picking up the costs. And that's a Prop 218 issue. So we have done some preliminary legal analysis, but before we take this back to the board with whatever recommendation the Finance Committee has, we'd probably want to do an in-depth legal analysis to make sure the board was considering only legal options. So that's all I have. So I'd like to turn it over to the Finance Committee, and we'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
All right, I'll let Director Boyd Hodgson go first, but I just want to ask one thing to kind of level set something, Glenn. And I understand the challenges with trying to going back and trying to identify which customers were here in between 2011 and 2014. and who are no longer here today. But am I correct that if we do one of the other options, it's only going to benefit the customers that are here today anyways, right? If we do rate stabilization, for example, well, obviously that's not going to benefit customers who have moved out of,
You're right.
of our service area, correct?
Yeah,
There's
it would
really,
lower
there really is no option on the table right now that will benefit the customers who were here between 2011 2014 and are no longer here.
Well, I wouldn't say there's anything that's on or off the table. We'd have to check the legality of going back. I think you could refund it to people who were here back in 2011. Staff isn't making that recommendation at this point in time, but the further back in time you go, the more difficult it is to figure out the fair allocation and to track them down and make compensation.
Yeah. Okay, I know, I understand, and I understand it's possible, but we would spend the 1.6 million trying to figure it out. Is my guess. And but I really wanted to point out that the other options that are being considered, they're all focused on future cost savings, if you will, that will only benefit those who are currently receiving a water bill from us.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Anything we do to lower the revenue requirement is going to benefit the folks that are customers now, paying into the system now.
All right, thank you. I definitely have some thoughts, but I want to give my colleague an opportunity to go.
Thank you. I'm glad that you mentioned that we are prohibited from establishing a COVID relief fund. I feel like I've tried to advocate for the folks that are really suffering. And it's unfortunate that we can't use it to help those the most in need. But it sounds to me like there is no way that we are going to be able to allocate this money 100% fairly for everyone that is involved. It's going to benefit people that didn't pay into the system, or we're going to have to spend a lot of money to our lawyers trying to track down the people that did. And I think that second option is just it's not practical and it's not realistic. Even though those folks did pay in, we have the money now. This happened now. So I am not really inclined to try to spend staff time or money to try to track down the people that are no longer, do the research to find out the people that were paying into the system at the time and now aren't. We may never find all of those people. And I think that would be a waste of the resources. So I do feel like, and I think President Snell and I are in agreement, as are the rest of the board members, given the brief discussion that we had at the public meeting, that some kind of benefit back to the ratepayers is in order. It's just the devil is in the details. The email that you sent around to the board about some of the parameters, it seemed like there were some complicated parameters around it, and there was no source information about that. For example, you said the money can be spent on water related purposes, and you've reiterated that, but that was also in the email. The email said the water should be used to offset the water supply costs of the agency. According to whom, right? I get it that we are going to be talking to our lawyers about how to spend the money, but you sent us a list of 5 things that we should think about without sort of says who. My response to a lot of these was, well, says who. So I'd like to know more about that. I appreciate the work that's been done that's gone into the $40 per year option, the $72.50 per year option, and the $55.16 per year option. I think it just comes down to trying to think about what's most equitable. And I'd like to know, our residential customers, so I've seen the pie chart that shows, what percentage of our customers have which size pipes. I would like to see that again, if it's easily accessible, so that we could sort of better understand, what percentage of our customer base would be getting the $55.16 refund, what percentage would be getting a greater percentage refund based on the size of the pipe. I think I'd like to see that if that's possible. But I'm, right now I'm leaning towards giving some money back to our customers. We've had a lot of people suffer, and I think that there are people that would really appreciate that money. That could really make a difference in some people's water bills.
I can see Mike Arthur, the wheels are spinning right now and he's pulling up charts. So I think you'll have it in a second. I know which pie chart you're talking about.
Yeah.
It shows the breakdown by meter size for all the customers.
Mhm.
Hey, Glenn, while we're waiting, I'll kind of piggyback onto that because I'm almost exactly in agreement. And really, I took away from our last Wednesday meeting that there was pretty strong consensus from the entire board to kind of go in this route. And I understand that there's always legalities and there's always things that we need to take into consideration. But I'm definitely more inclined to doing, returning the money back. Now we can figure out the final details at some point as we continue this discussion as to how much each different individual customer group gets, or do we just even, like you mentioned during your presentation, do we just evenly divide it? That part of it maybe still, there's still some stuff to hash out around, but I thought about this a lot over the weekend, and if we just simply use it to offset our future revenue needs, it's been floated out there a couple different times. I mean, that's I guess the next best option, but it's not, in my opinion, the best option, because what happens is that we get the money goes into kind of the black hole of the budget that we just talked about, and it really doesn't have the kind of impact on the customers, the same kind of impact as it would if they actually either got a physical check returned to them, or a line item on a future bill that shows a credit on their bill, and then they're able to use that money to offset any hardships they may be having related to COVID-19 or anything else. Because at the end of the day, this is their money, and I think we should do everything we possibly can to return it to them directly versus trying to throw it into into the black hole of the budget. And it's just, I went back and forth thinking about the best way of doing it, and I just keep coming to the conclusion that is the best way. I know it doesn't help the folks that have left our service area since 2014. And that's why I started off with making the point that neither does using it to offset our revenue requirements either. So if there was if we lived in a perfect world and there was a practical and reasonable way to identify those folks who have left, then I would certainly be willing to do that. I just don't want, I want to continue the progress over perfection, and I don't want the perfection to get in the way of doing the right thing for our customers.
Yeah, one thing you said really resonated with you call it the black hole of the budget. And if we were to choose that approach to maybe offset future revenue requirements, I would say that we would go ahead and calculate what the rates should be absent the 1.6, and then we can calculate how much of a reduction the $1.6 million would get. And then on every bill going out, it would show people that your bill is X dollars lower this month because of that. And yes, it would be 12 months of time before they maybe saw a benefit equivalent to a check up front. But we wouldn't want it to get lost in the noise of the budget. We want to make sure it's highlighted on every every water bill that gets sent out. So Director Boyd Hodgson, is one of these two charts, either the one that Mike had it on or the one he scrolled down to, the one you're referring to?
I think it's the, I think this captures sort of the, we can look at either one, and just before I ask sort of questions about this and how that would actually apply to these dollar numbers that we've talked about, I think if we tried to refund this money as a rate stabilization offer, or put it towards the budget, that has the feeling of not real money. It's not real money. They didn't really get any money, but this was real money that they paid in for most of them. And I would argue that probably the majority of the customers that we have we haven't had like a complete, 100% turnover since 2014 in the area. So that was real money. And so by sort of giving them back real money, it feels better, and it's a better story, and it feels like we are doing the right thing. Looking at these two pie charts, so I was trying to follow along with what you said, and this is the first time that I've heard you talk about, these, the 4092 and the 7250 and the 5516, and I want to make sure that I'm understanding it. So the average single family customer, and that's 88% right here. They all have 5/8. Is that right?
Now, let me bring up another Excel chart. Now, this is going to be a chart. It's going to be an Excel file. So
Okay.
it's not as pretty as you're used to looking at, not what I would normally show you.
Okay. All right.
But, so here is a slice and dice of, can you guys see that Excel spreadsheet that I have my cursor on?
Not yet.
So, okay, so this column C is our 5/8 customer. Oh,
Mike,
yes.
we can't see your column C.
Oh, can you not see the chart?
We see the pie chart still.
Oh, okay. Hold on. Let me stop sharing and share again. Sorry. I'm used to doing this on Teams, not on a Zoom. So give me a second. Okay. Share. Okay. Now can you see the Excel?
Yes.
Okay. So column C is our 5. Okay. So this is a slice and dice of all of our meters by meter size, which I'm highlighting right up here, and customer type down on the left. So this is as of February of 2021. So in February 2021, this is the column C that I wanted to highlight, the 5/8 meters. Our residential 5/8 meters are about 14,400, give or take. So those are the customers, our quote average, and I'm gonna make it a little bigger. Our average single family resident customer, as General Manager Chrome said, with a 5/8 meter using about 13 minutes a month.
So 14,397
Yeah,
customers.
and there's 72 multifamily residents that would also account for that too. So,
Okay, so
oops.
14,397 times 5516 is only $794,000.
Right.
So where does the rest of the 1.6?
It would benefit everybody. We couldn't, as General Manager Brome said, you couldn't do the credit to a select group. You'd have to give it to all customers. So it'd have to go to all of these customers.
Okay, so what does that look like so the $55.16 would be the majority of the customers in the district, right? That's what I'm looking at this chart. With this chart, overwhelming majority of people are in the 5/8 residential.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. The majority of them, that's about 15,000. If you look here, it's about 15,000. Now you have to account for some. I don't use the amount exactly. There's some non-bills in here, which is like our own meters. We're not going to credit ourselves. There's some other things in here that we want to do. So it's about 15,000 5/8 meters.
Okay. And so then, as the pipe size increases, then that means their water usage increases, and that means that they would be entitled to a slightly higher rebate or refund, right?
If you're doing it by meter size, it would be regardless of how much water they use. Now, it is true that usually the larger meter uses more water, but if you're doing it by meter size, which are the numbers that General Manager Chrome gave you, it would be based just on meter size, not on usage. But yes, so a 1-inch meter would be, I don't know what the number came out to be. It'd be a little bit more than $55.
And those are, if you have a 1-inch meter, is that usually a business customer or industrial customer?
Well, here we could see it right here. So we have about 412 residential customers. So single family residence customers, about 412 of them have a 1-inch meter. The next biggest would be irrigation and commercial customers.
Okay.
So we could slice and dice that and show you one, down the line exactly who would be affected and by how much.
Yeah, and I used the phrase meter equivalence before.
Right.
So it's an important concept because it's not linear. So for example, if you looked at a 2-inch meter, it's not worth 2 1-inch meters. It's actually worth 4 1-inch meters because you're
Right.
looking at the cross-sectional area of the pipe, which is a function of the square.
Okay.
So, so when you apply the area and do that meter equivalence, that gives that other number I brought up, which is not the typical single family customer fares better if you just divide it evenly, and the larger meter customers fare better if you do it on meter equivalence.
Thank you
Just
for that.
real quick, I just did what General Manager Chrome was talking about. These are what the meter equivalents would be, and I hope I typed it in. I typed it in fast, so in case I made a typing error, don't take these as in stone. But like I think you were saying, Glenn, that a 1.5 inch meter is 4 times the equivalent as I was typing.
But this was a pretty preliminary analysis. We didn't have a lot of time since it was directed to come to the board on Wednesday night, or to the finance committee. I apologize. So we would refine this, but it would be helpful to find out what the committee's recommendation would be, or narrow it down to just a few, and we could provide a little bit more analysis. Or we're happy to use the time we have to do the analysis on the fly, although that's always dangerous.
Yeah, I don't need the analysis on the fly, but it sounds like, at least from the discussion today, and then even the discussion that took place with the entire board on Wednesday, that the consensus is to find a way to give the money back to our customers. And I'm okay with staff coming back to the full board with a couple of different options on how to do that. One could be just dividing the number of the total number of the money that was refunded to us by the total number of the customers that we have, or doing some sort of breakdown by meter. I did have a question for the ops folks. If somebody has a 1 inch meter, let's say at one point 20 years ago they had a dozen avocado trees in their yard, so they needed more water, but with the price of water going up and people being a little bit more mindful of conservation, they shut it off. I mean, is it possible that somebody has a meter and it's not really even activated? They don't actually use it?
Mike, do you know?
Yeah, so we do have a couple of those, Director Sinella, but a lot of the times they'll set themselves to inactive status. So if you're set to inactive, I believe you pay like $12.50 a month, just because we still have a pipeline to that meter. They could certainly pull the meter, but I think if you pull it, there's costs involved in that as well.
Okay. And then the last thing I have on this is, I appreciate you seeking legal advice on this matter. The one thing that could maybe sidetrack this whole thing, and I really hope it's not, is that if we can do a little bit more analysis as to any risks that we might have from a lawsuit to come out of us returning the money. And I think one of the lawyers' opinion was, I hardly believe that somebody would complain about that, but we live in California, and people sue for anything these days. So I just want to make sure that, again, we don't rack up $1 million in legal fees trying to defend why we were returning the money back to the people. But I'm 100% committed to finding some way to do just that, send the money back to the people.
As you can imagine, this has been the topic of discussion amongst the general managers of all the water districts in the County Water Authority service area. And we did an informal survey. In my recollection, there's about 18 agencies that responded. And the question was basically, what do you plan to do with the money? This was early on, and I don't think any agency had yet taken it to their boards or gotten final direction. But I believe the number was 14 out of 18 said they're going to be recommending it for something like a rate stabilization fund to offset future costs. There were a few that were going to try to refund it to customers. A couple wanted to apply it towards CIP projects, but most of it was use it to offset future costs. And I understand that's not where the board's discussion was or where this finance committee discussion is, but just wanted to share that with you as to kind of the prevailing feeling amongst the general managers in the water authority service area.
I can understand that. This isn't very scientific, but this weekend as I was walking the dog in our neighborhood park, some of the same neighbors that I run into every day when I'm walking the dog. I kind of gave them a little bit of a heads up that we would be talking about this at this meeting. And one of my neighbors actually in Orange County worked in the water industry his whole career. He's retired now, but he actually, he immediately said, just pay off your pension, use it, throw it to your pension. It's the best. It's by far the best way to go. But he was the only neighbor who felt that way, because like I said earlier, the average customer doesn't really understand that black hole of our budget, and they're not going to realize that, as Director Boyd Hodgson said, a real refund if we do something like that. And in the long term, the one neighbor who had worked their entire career in the water industry, he's like, you're paying 7% on that money. You're not, there's no better way to spend that money, no more beneficial way for the customer to spend that money. Referring to the 7% that PERS charges us for our pension liability. But every single other customer that I talked to in the park that day said, no, I want a refund. And I want to try. And I know that's a small, unscientific sample of our customers, but I suspect that's probably overwhelming percentage of our customers, if asked, would feel the same way.
So is there some additional analysis that the Finance Committee would like us to do and bring it back to the committee? Is there a certain time horizon you see resolving this issue?
So what I would like to just have a breakdown, and it looks like you've already gotten a jump on it, is, what percentage of our customer base is getting what amounts? And it looks like you've already factored in the non-linear way in which the money would be applied based on the meteor equivalency. Congratulations for doing that. That's very complicated, and I appreciate that you did that. But just sort of fill in the gaps on that spreadsheet of, here, most of the residential customers will get this much. If your meter is this size, and I don't think most people know what their meter size is, but they might. Just sort of laying it out so that we can just sort of get kind of a ballpark about that. And once we decide how, what this is going to actually look like, what the pull through is, if it is a credit, I really feel strongly that we need to show on the bills, here is what your bill was, and here is a line item that says, and you were credited this much. Because as much as, there, in some of our meetings, there's been sort of suspicion about how people would use their money and things like that. And, some of us are suspicious of our customers. They're suspicious of us. And we have a ways to go with establishing trust. So showing, here's your bill. And, because of this, maybe there's a little blurb down at the bottom that says, because of this, this lawsuit that Vallecitos was refunded X amount of money. And because of that, we're giving you back some of that money. I think it's really important that we're very clear about the numbers, not just here's your bill and it includes a rebate of. Right. There needs to be a before and after.
Okay. Is
there a staff preference on doing a bill credit versus just issuing a check, Gwen?
I don't know. I don't work in the billing department. I would think it would be easier to be a credit, but Wes is here. Maybe I'll throw that one over to Wes.
Yeah, so we'd definitely not preference to issue checks and none of that, but it cuts into the refund we give to customers. It costs us about $8 to $9 to write a check in staff time and everything else. So, I mean, if you're talking about $55, you got to knock that down to 47 to write a check to customers.
Yep. Okay. Good. Thank you. Good to know. And then you had mentioned, Glenn, about is there a time frame? I think it's as soon as possible. I understand that we still need to go back to the full board, and we'll probably have some more discussion with our three colleagues at that time. But if the consensus is provided at that time to go into some form of a credit, be it one of the two options that we've already discussed tonight, or some other option that hasn't come up yet, then let's try to get this resolved as quickly as possible for our customers.
I guess maybe I'll phrase it a little bit different way. Does the finance committee want to see this again? Are you comfortable with us taking your feedback and taking it to the board? And if the finance committee wants to see it again, then there's two paths. One is just to stick with our normally scheduled finance committee. And Wes, what is the date of the next finance committee?
So we were looking at April 12th, but I think we might have to, it should be early April.
Yeah, so early April, or we could try to turn it around quick and have a special finance committee meeting that we've talked only about this topic. But April 12th isn't that far away, but I just want to get a sense for the urgency.
I'll defer to Director Boyd Hodgson, but I'm good for just going straight to the board with some options that you have, so long as those options reflect giving credit back to our customers.
Yep.
But if Director Boyd Hodgson's would like to meet again and see the specifics before we go to the full board, I'm open for that as well.
I don't think we need to meet again. I would just like to, when it goes to the full board, that information that I asked for, I'd like for that to be presented so we can have a look.
Yeah, and in the staff report, when we take it to the board, we'll indicate that the finance committee's recommendation is that there be a direct benefit to the customers.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay,
Great.
I think that's all we had today. I don't see any hands raised at this time, so I think that's it from the staff side.
Okay. I don't have anything further. Director Boyd Hodgson, do you have anything?
No.
Okay, everybody. Well, thank you again for everybody who participated and contributed to tonight's meeting. And thank you to those who joined us in the audience. And we'll go ahead and adjourn. Have a good night.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Good
Everyone.
night.